Hello, this is Thomas Donald Jacobs for Paperboys, and it is Thursday, January 21st of 2021. So the day after the inauguration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. There was a different topic scheduled for this week, but in light of recent events, I thought it was important to talk about what has been happening with regard to protecting the queer and trans community, because a lot's been happening in the last 2 days. And it's a relief because the last 4 years have been a nightmare. I know that some people still don't believe that. Don't bother commenting. I'm not interested in your gaslighting. It's done. No one cares what you think no more. And for those of you who genuinely don't know but are interested in learning, I will put a link below to just one of the many lists of the Trump administration's numerous and varied discriminatory policies and actions. There's also going to be a documentary coming out, I believe, next month. I think it's called Transgender in Trumpland. That looks like it too is going to be well worth a watch. Now, moving on to what's been going on. Yesterday, Biden made a start at rolling back Trump's policies when he signed the executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. I've put the link below, but here is the rundown. Section 1 of the order lays out the general policy to prohibit that kind of discrimination in housing, healthcare, education, and employment. It then cites the relevant sections of the law, which it has to do to be a proper executive order that won't be overturned in court. And it then goes on to make it clear that the new policy of this administration is to combat that kind of discrimination on an intersectional level as well, which is fantastic. It's really, however, the section 2 of the order that gets to the heart of the matter, and that is, how is this going to be enacted? The problem is that so much of what Trump did was behind the scenes things. You had the things that were very public, like the ban on transgender people in the military, but you also had a lot of things that were very not so public, like minor little things that actually meant a lot, but which weren't always picked up on, right down to just the erasure of wording from government websites, which often happened overnight with no announcements. There was no policy announced. It just happened. All of that has to be sussed out so it can be addressed. So, Biden's executive order lays out a plan that's going to deal with this in a very methodological way, okay? Because this isn't about addressing individual actions so much as rooting out an entire culture of discrimination created primarily by Trump and his cronies. So, first, they're going to make a kind of survey, all right? The heads of federal agencies are directed to make a list of all programs covered by anti-discrimination laws and current rulings concerning sex, like Title VII, which has now been extended to include queer and trans people under a recent Supreme Court ruling, namely Barstock versus Clayton County. Second, the heads of federal agencies then have to identify where current orders, department memos, directives, policies, basically the things Trump did and his cronies, where those things violate both the law and the new policy. Third, they must then revise those policies to bring them in line with the law and the new policy. Fourth, they must consider what new policies or programs also need to be put in place. And fifth, to make sure that this isn't just empty words, it's not a proclamation making it National Hot Dog Day or whatever, they are going to be held to account. It stipulates that agency heads have 100 days to consult with the Attorney General and develop their plans. So this is all going to have oversight and there will be follow up. The rest of the document contains the usual legal provisos. I believe the most important of which for us is line B, which says that, quote, the order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations, end quote. Now, I don't think that the funding will be an issue at the start of this rollback because so much of what Trump did was simply negating protections that were either explicit or implicit with reference to the queer and trans community, and which didn't come with any kind of budgetary considerations. However, entirely new policies and programs, of course, will have to find money. Hopefully, a lot of that can be done in the discretionary funds and avoid the congressional budget process that would give Republicans a chance to solve things and screw around. On January 20th, Biden also repealed Trump's presidential memorandum of March 23rd, 2018, which superseded his memorandum of 2017. Those were the two that attempted to ban transgender individuals from military service. Another rollback concerns a memo that didn't get a lot of coverage because it was so recent. Just last Sunday, a few days before he left office, Trump's Justice Department issued a 23-page memo that was meant to block a Supreme Court ruling from being followed. And that's the aforementioned Bostock v. Clayton County from 2020, which ruled that queer and transgender people are protected in the workplace under Title VII. Obviously, there was no chance of that being followed. It was just meant as a final fuck you to us and Biden. So it's good that that's going away, and that's all great. All of that is great. But here's the thing. All of this can easily be undone by the next Republican lunatic to come along. And it's clear that some of the Republican Party intend to use transgender and queer people as a wedge issue well into the future. And unfortunately, it's effective, okay? The people who tried to overthrow the government on January 6th were whipped into a frenzy that morning at a pro-Trump rally where, among other things, Donald Trump Jr. went on a deranged anti-transgender rant. Now, I'm not gonna go into his demented ravings. Samantha Lux, she's already covered it, and I'll put the link to her vlog below. Basically, it was just bigot lies and nonsense, but fact is, these people aren't going away anytime soon. And so an executive order doesn't go far enough. It isn't permanent, and it will not affect things outside of the control of the federal government. And court rulings aren't enough either, okay? The Bostock ruling from 2020 is encouraging, but the costs of continually having to turn to the courts to rule on individual cases of discrimination is prohibitive. Most people just don't have the time and resources. Moreover, the makeup of the Supreme Court has changed since the Bostock case, okay? Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, and she was replaced by an unqualified, unhinged loon that we now are stuck with. All right. A new case could result in a different ruling. What we need is specific protection encoded in law that's much more stable. It's much more difficult to overturn that. We need to pass the Equality Act, which contains explicit wording to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. It passed in the House of Representatives in 2019, but the vote in the Senate was, of course, under Mitch McConnell, blocked and stalled. The situation has changed. Democrats now control the Senate thanks to the Georgia races, and more importantly, the GOP is not really in a position to raise that big a stink. Several Republican senators, including one of the bill's primary opponents, Josh Hawley, disgraced themselves by taking part in the insurrection. The sane part of the GOP desperately needs to distance itself from the insane part. And lastly, Biden promised to make passing the Equality Act a priority of his first 100 days back when he was campaigning. Now is the time to do this. If we do it now, we can get it without the proposed amendment that would allow religious exemptions. We cannot allow that to be tacked on. It would entirely undermine the law. Everyone who wants to discriminate in the United States against transgender people and queer people are either deranged TERFs, or more commonly, they claim that they want to do it for religious reasons. Now, you don't get to discriminate against any other groups in the United States on the basis of your personal religious beliefs, and so that should not be allowed for the trans and queer community. We should be no different. So now is the time to start contacting your senators and writing the White House. I'll put a link to the White House contact form below, and you can look up your senators on your own. That was it for this week. Remember, there's still a plague going on, so, look after each other, make good decisions, wash your hands, keep your distance, wear your mask, and hopefully I will see you soon. Bye.